As a goaltender, physiotherapist, and coach, during this time of social isolation, I found myself doing lots of specific training exercises in order to help myself when I get back onto the ice to be at my best performance, pain-free and strong, ready to go. I wanted to share with you today some of my favorite exercises to do for what I would consider one of the most important muscles to develop strength in as a goaltender, and that's referred to as your glute med muscle. And basically this muscle here, it's one of the glute muscles, so buttock muscles. It runs along the side here, and it's got two main functions. Well, actually I would say three main functions. One is it's a hip abductor, it's called. So basically it's responsible for bringing the leg out to the side this way. So again, if we think of this from a goaltending perspective, pushing off, T-slides, T-pushes, going to be super important to have that muscle to be strong during that push-off action. It also helps in terms of pelvic stability and strength. So when this muscle is weak, our balance is going to be off, our ability to stay tall to the puck is going to be compromised, and there's also going to be a tendency for us to collapse down in through the hip region, particularly after we've pushed off. So in order to stay nice and tall to the shooter, you're really going to want to make sure that you develop strength in this particular muscle. So I typically break this down into more controlled movements and then vary it to something that's much more dynamic. So the first thing I do as just a typical warm-up is I do just some gentle balancing exercises where, so let's say if I'm working on my right glute med muscle here, I'm just going to balance on that side. I'll sometimes even look in the mirror and make sure that my pelvis, my hip, isn't collapsing down. So you can watch yourself in the mirror. I'm contracting that muscle, and I'm also setting my pelvic floor muscle as I'm doing this. So essentially what it looks like is I'm squeezing here, I'm thinking about bringing my belly button in towards my spine, I'm hollowing my stomach to activate the pelvic floor, and then I'm just maintaining. I'm going to hold that. I'm going to make sure that my balance is correct. I'm not moving to side at all. So I want to be nice and strong on that side. I'm really feeling that glute med muscle contracting, working hard. The next thing I do after that is I would actually isolate it by doing some hip abduction movements. You can do this either in standing, or you can actually go on your side when you do this. And typically I would use some form of resistance. So I would use a resistant band or something of that nature, or maybe an ankle weight if you're on your side. And then essentially I'm going to do the same idea. I'm balancing this time on my left side. I'm squeezing that right glute muscle, and basically the leg is going to be going slightly back and to the side. So that's what really isolates it. So one thing I've noticed with a lot of my patients is if that muscle is weak, there's going to be a tendency to compensate by actually using some of the muscles in through the front of the hip. So psoas, or your hip flexor, or some of the muscles that attach onto the IT band. And so you'll find that some people, when they're going to the side, if this glute med muscle is weak, they'll bring the leg slightly forward or just to the side and not back. So you really want to make sure when you're doing this, you're moving back. I'm also, as I'm balancing on the left side, I'm using that same muscle to maintain stability as I do that hip abduction movement. From there I go into just a regular squat. Now with the squat, couple things. In order to activate the glute med muscle, what you can do is actually, again, use the TheraBand, which I don't have with me right now, but typically I would tie it just above the knees. I'm going to try and keep my feet parallel, and essentially as I'm going into my squat position, as I'm sitting back, the majority of my weight's going on my heels, and essentially with the band, if you can imagine the band around here, I'm actually slightly pushing off against the band, essentially to make sure I'm isolating that glute med muscle and not compensating by overusing my quads, overusing psoas. So again, in a lot of cases, what I find with patients is they might be trying to strengthen this muscle, but they might be inadvertently overusing, again, whether it's the quad muscle or the psoas muscle. So really trying to make sure that you're isolating that muscle correctly. From there, the next step I would go into is actually a single leg squat. Same kind of principles apply in terms of making sure that you're using the correct muscle, you're not overusing your quads, and also with a single leg squat, you want to make sure that the knee, that's what I find a lot of times, if this glute med muscle is weak, you'll find that the knee actually collapses in if you start doing that single leg squat. And this is where a lot of injuries actually take place for goalies. They'll be essentially overstretching their MCL, so one of the ligaments in the knee area, or their meniscus. And so again, if we're weakened through here, it's going to actually compromise what's going on with our knee. And again, this is one of the reasons why you'll see so many goalies have knee injuries, particularly in the inner portion of the knee. So really, really important to have good form with this. So again, the idea with that single leg squat, majority of my weight's on my heel, I'm sitting back, and I actually just did that incorrectly there. Just again, I'm not firing that correctly, but as I come back, I'm making sure that that kneecap and that knee are not collapsing in. We want to stay nice and strong and stable through there. And then the last thing I do from more of a dynamic perspective is I move from a single leg squat to a lateral plyometric type exercise. So this is where you're going to start off single leg squat, right? And I'm pushing off now. Pushing off. So I'm firing that glute med muscle as I'm going side to side here. So then again, you can think about how that would translate to a strong T-push in goaltending or T-slide, etc. So those lateral movements, right, that are so key to being a goalie that can perform quickly and in a good, strong position, you can see how that muscle is going to be super important in terms of building up that strength, so that when you return to hockey after the social isolation is over with, you're going to feel that much more confident getting back on the ice, pain-free, and able to perform at your best. So typically I start out, as I said, I start out with just isolating the muscle, just with some simple balancing type exercises. I move then to isolating in terms of the hip abduction movements. From there, I would go into a squat with the TheraBand, single leg squat, and then your dynamic pushing off. And you get through a couple sets of that, I'm telling you, that muscle is going to feel super, super tired, fatigued. So you're going to want to, again, build up that strength. Now, one thing I should note is that you really want to make sure that your form stays pretty good throughout each exercise. And again, what you're going to be looking for is that knee inadvertently internally rotating, right, with any of your squats? Am I losing my pelvic stability? Is it staying parallel, or am I collapsing? These are all going to be signs that, again, that glute med muscle is weak, and that perhaps you also have some work to do in terms of core strength. I hope this helps. Let me know if you have any specific questions or concerns by commenting below, and have a great day.